Salam and welcome back to Somali Dispatch and to our weekly program, Dispatches. I'm Abdulkadir Goulet. This week on Dispatches, what does the recently concluded NCC meetings in Mogadishu mean for Somalia's elections? President Farmajo's speech tonight, we take a look at that. Renewed Ethiopian interest on Zeila. What does it mean, the renewed US interest in Somaliland for Somalilanders? And lastly, a cautionary tale for all Somalis as it relates to the competition between the US and China for the Horn of Africa. Faisal Roble, a renowned Somali scholar and an astute political analyst, joins us to discuss those and other points. Salam and welcome, Faisal Roble, to SomaliDispatch.com. Thank you for accepting our invitation and for joining us this evening. If you can start us off by giving us your assessment on the Horn of Africa's current political and socio-economical situation would be great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Abdulkadir. I was in the region not too long ago, the month of December. I was in the Horn of Africa. And with the Horn, you have to start with what's going on in Ethiopia because of its massive population, 115 million people of multi-ethnic groups. It is in the midst of civil war, particularly in the north. Prime Minister Abiy has been trying to really get out of that quagmire, but he has not been able to do so. So Ethiopia is the elephant in the house. If Ethiopia implodes or even starts to break up, its impact could go far deep into Somalia and Somali region. So keeping an eye on Ethiopia and what happens is very key. Also, there is a famine now setting on Ethiopia, particularly in the Somali region, the Oromo, the Afar, and the Tigray, which is really the worst region of all the places in Ethiopia. With the Somali region, famine is very serious. Livestock death has been already recorded. Now people are on the brink of dying. And the sad story about the Somali region is that $200 million is earmarked for mitigation efforts earlier has been utilized for the election that took place sometime in September, October. So that is something that the people in that region would be raising a lot of questions. Somalia is really a messy, emerging democratic kind of thing. And I say democratic advisedly because there's no dictator or a powerful, charismatic personality that can dominate Somalia because everything has been changed with the civil war. So whatever we get from Somalia will be a slow process that moves or inches that country towards a better governance, in my opinion. Somaliland is, as many people say, shining a star on the spot simply because it has no terrorism, it has no major clan conflicts. The politics, at least for every 5 years, is predictable as to what happens. Power changes peacefully without delay, as opposed in many cases, as opposed to Somalia. So although not perfect 100%, but it is a better model so far as to what we will see. But again, Kenya, which is part of our greater web of the Horn, is doing very well. Economically, it's doing very well. Politically and socially, it's very stable. And it has the added importance for Somalis in the sense that Somalis found in Kenya their second home and conduct very, very massive, healthy business throughout the east, the coast, but particularly Nairobi and Mombasa. So I think the region is tumultuous. However, everything is not bad. There are bright spots, as I said, but there is worrisome developments in Ethiopia that we need to keep an eye on.
Right. Let's stay with Somalia for a minute there. We've heard in a speech from President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo today. That speech was wide covering, though not long on its length. What is your assessment on some of this stuff or the success that the president touted today?
Yeah, so I think the form and content is the way we should look at that speech. I think the form, this was his best speech. As you know, in the past, Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo, the president of Somalia, came to this forum haphazardly, without having notes, without having well-prepared speech. He stumbled across words, and verbs and what have you. This one, it was very smooth and flawless. People who work for him prepared it very well. Content-wise, I think it was more of a populist content, in my opinion. He talked a lot about the big achievements, and he made it very big. I think he could have said, these are small achievements, we are trying to work, but little things that any country should do. He made it a big, huge thing, like the reform of the army, which is not really of a big achievement, in my opinion, because after 20 years of the civil war, with the AMISOM and international help, they should have at least expanded the territory that they control, which is not. I learned it when I was in East Africa, in the Horn of Africa, that with the exception of Kismayo, the entire Jubaland by far is in the hands of Al-Shabaab. So is part of Galmudug, so is part of Hirshabelle, which is next door to Mogadishu, as well as Southwest. So I don't understand when he talks about such a military success and re-establishment of the army. I think he also very much made a big deal about the assignments that Somalia gets at the UN. This is a routine. Member states get assignments no matter what, as long as you are a member, and these are rotating seats. But again, I can understand this is a nation that has been beaten down to the ground. So for the president to highlight some of the presence of Somalia at the world, at least it's okay. But I think he has to also not make that as a huge achievement. It is just a routine process that UN assignments move from one country to another. So we have to talk to our people like they are adults, not children who can be betrayed and told whatever story.
Right. It was interesting to me. One of the couple of things that stood out for me was the use of the word "we" as opposed to my government's achievements. The second was taking credit for things like fighting corruption and debt relief. What came to mind when you hear the president talking about these items?
I think, well, the debt relief is something that we always play politics with. We have been working on the debt relief from the time Sharif Ahmed took part, and again, this is a natural, rigorous process that countries that owe money go through, and they have to meet certain criterion in order to qualify for not really debt relief. Well, debt relief is a very huge nomenclature. There is restructuring of the debt. There is a difference of the debt so that they don't have to pay so it's a huge program. I think what we can glean from that is that in the international arena's eyes, Somalia is trying, and that's a word, to put its financial house in order. And we cannot wrong it that. I think, but what we need to say is that it's not a one man's achievement, it's a collective achievement that has been coming from one stage to another till this time. Yeah, so give the devil his due. People like Wazir Bayle has worked very hard on this issue and tried to publicize it at least so that the public know. Again, it's something that nationally we have to do.
Right. It was interesting to me as well that though the president hailed the outcome of the NCC 6-day meetings in Mogadishu on elections, that he did not address, again, one of your words, the elephant in the room, which was the suspension of the prime minister by the president. The NCC's communique, what stood out to you in terms of having speedy, credible elections in Somalia within the 45 days allocated for that process?
Yes, I think to use a very tough language, Somalis say "Mabadalana dorte senogab." Somebody starts to walk before it's born. What I'm trying to say is they just repeated the same mistake again, that for such a huge and heavy problem that we have been having, which is to meet election deadlines and the moving targets of election, for them to come out and reward themselves with only 40 days to say that we will do everything in 40 days is really, again, just repeating the same mistake. I'm not saying they cannot do it. I think they may be able to do it, but given our history, to give themselves 40 days was just, in my opinion, very, very hasty decision, known for Somalis to do things in a hasty way. I think I tried last night when I read the report to take the 40 days and the way we do professionally, build back from the end day all the way to the day you are in, and see the benchmarks that are in between and what needs to be done. So if you account for the transportation, for calling people from different countries, the little, delays between, one region to the other, 40 days is very stringent. So I just hope that they do it. That's one thing that stood for me. The rest was a rehash to really say that we're going to do it. I don't know if I read a resolution in that the resolution pertaining to the two position or two places to be held, which has been a bottleneck for a while. Other than that, Abdulqadir, the two camps are there. Some of the regional presidents are adamant to make sure that whoever candidates they send to Mogadishu are pro-President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo. And the two other, Jubaland and Puntland, are have their own way. So you have to understand that Saeed Deni, the president of Puntland, may be having his own agenda also to run for the presidency, in which case he may starve the so-called united opposition groups, because if he's running, the people that he chooses plus the people that he gets from Jubaland are expected to be loyal to him. Is this a betrayal that Saeed Deni played in the hands of the opposition groups? We have to see until the lady starts to sing. But what Saeed Deni is planning does not bode well for the united opposition groups, who are also aspirants to become president of the nation.
Right. Looking at the optics of the 6-day meetings with the NCC heads, including the Prime Minister, with the set 45 days, did you at least get the willingness to conclude the elections? Have you noticed, or did they single anything to the public where one could walk away thinking, well, at least now they're serious, perhaps they can aim for 2/3, which is the quorum of the parliament, to have the process started that way? I think that would have been a better benchmark politically for the country. Do you get a sense of them saying enough is enough, let's do what we can now, and what we can do, like you said, run the seat elections in their regions? Do you walk away with any sort of commitment from how they're acting lately?
I don't see commitment, I see fatigue. I think they are fatigued. The nation is fatigued, and then the international community that probably finances Somalia's quote-unquote existence at this point in time is also fatigued. And I think they are also smelling the coffee, in the sense that, for instance, if you take Jubaland, I was informed by well-placed Jubaland leader that even if everything goes well and they have to do the election, 1/3 or more of the electorates who will end up coming to Mogadishu will be handpicked by Al-Shabaab. You have to understand that a huge swath of Jubaland is controlled by Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab to the outside world is a terrorist. To Somali politicians who coexist with Al-Shabaab, they're businessmen. They're taking close to, I was told, some amount of money on a daily basis from the port of Mogadishu as we speak. They also control some of the tariffs that go between businesses that are tariffed that go between Jubaland, Kismayo, and the rest. So a well-placed Jubaland leader informed me that a minimum of 1/3 of the people to be elected from Jubaland, that doesn't include the Gedo versus Madobe conflict, is an independent hand that Al-Shabaab will be having once they send the delegates. So
And
you're talking about
that is telling, in what could happen in other regions as well.
Southwest is the same. As you know, they threaten the elders, and if the elders don't pick individuals that Al-Shabaab doesn't approve, the elder, the family, and everybody gets killed. The government knows, all the way from the president of the federal government and the federal member states presidents. It is a detente that finally they succumbed to setting some of the power and governance exercise in southern Somalia to Al-Shabaab. So I think that also adds to the fact, say, if I can get my 2/3 clean, say in Kismayo or in Baydabo, the rest, the 1/3 that comes from wherever could go. So that's also another factor. I think they would have resisted. I think they would have fought over this again, but I think they also got some stern warning from the international community, who inched towards designating some of them what we call in Somalia or spoilers, and nobody wants to be one of those.
Right. If we go back to the broader picture of the Horn of Africa, specifically as it relates to relationship between Ethiopia and Somalis in what used to be the Republic, and now perhaps divvied up into southern and northern Somaliland and Somalia. A well-known analyst from the United States, where you currently reside, Michael Rubin, wrote that Ethiopia and mainly its leader now Abiy Ahmed are eyeing the port city of Zeila in Somaliland. I'm assuming you read that. There isn't a Somali that didn't read that could read English. What was your takeaways in that article?
My takeaway is that Abiy is what we call Pax Ethiopiana, the greater Ethiopia. He doesn't believe Ethiopian border is end at Tagwajale or Alai Badai or Fair. Abiy believes that the greater boundaries of Ethiopia go deep into Somalia, Somaliland, and even Djibouti. I think in the last war with Tigray, he realized how it's very dangerous for his country to not have access to the sea. So as Ali Chirde, who really had a fascinating little speech at the Parliament of Somaliland yesterday, or Abdelkader Jirde, basically taught and told Somalis, no matter where they are from, that Ethiopia's policy toward having an outlet to the sea never changed. And I tend to agree with him. Such geopolitics and what you call long vision strategies of nations don't change. I think there has been talks inside Addis Ababa, particularly at the top leadership of Ethiopia, that there has to be some sort of Ethiopia-owned access to the sea through Somaliland. So the name of Zeila, which has a historical flavor for Ethiopia way back, it seems to be the attractive. Just two things I would add. John Spencer, his famous book, Ethiopia at Bay, talks in detail how Ethiopia wanted to take over Zeila. The British agreed with them. The British asked Ethiopia, Haile Selassie, to choose between Zeila and Assab, Eritrea. Thinking that they can get always Somalia and Zeila, they opted to get the Assab one. But the Zeila option, again, resurfaced during Mengistu Haile Mariam, who did a feasibility study, what it will take to develop Zeila to the capacity that it can feed and help and serve Ethiopia. So we have this. I think Rubin's article comes at the right time. I'm sure he has some intelligence reports, because mostly lobbyists, academicians, and think tank fellows in the United States get declassified access of some information. They get a window of what's going on that you and I naturally don't get it. Remember 2 years ago when the United States Institute for Peace assembled 6 former ambassadors to Ethiopia, and they were talking about Ethiopia's pending potential disintegration. People were saying, like, what do they get from this information? But they had some intelligence report. So Michael must have had some concrete report. I would just caution our Somali brothers to keep their eyes open, and as Chirde said that things like this don't go away or don't change from one regime to another in Ethiopia. It's a mainstay of Ethiopian policy.
Right. On the other hand, Michael Rubin also signaled to the states to improve, changes to the way they deal with Somaliland. And there has been bills that are currently being circulated at the Senate in the US that talks about having some sort of a direct relations with Somaliland militarily. Is there anything to that? And we know the importance of Berbera, another Ethiopian and Amharic sounding name, port city, famous with its perhaps the largest runway in Horn of Africa. Do you see the U.S. Having its dual, dealings with Somalia and Somaliland coming back and reenacting that policy?
Yeah, so Michael was saying that if the U.S. just gives more attention, even a visit to Zeila, that will deter Ethiopia's appetite towards Somaliland. And I know he favors recognition for Somaliland. I think the U.S. has interest in Somaliland. The fact that you had a team of congressional researchers visiting Somaliland and giving very, very glowingly positive report back to the United States speaks to that. I think Abdelkader, what's happening is the United States is frustrated with Somalia, to be very candid, and they don't want to close doors to potential alternatives. Somaliland is another potential alternative. They will not jump quickly, in my opinion, for recognizing Somaliland because of the AU. If you recall the entire Ethiopian war, the big challenge for America to take one side was the AU role. They couldn't even declare what's happening in Tigray as a human rights genocide because AU wanted it not to be that way, and the US took the back seat for the AU. It will not jump on Somaliland, but it may also utilize or deal with Somaliland the same way that it deals with Taiwan,
who's established a political relationship with Hargeisa.
Who established a political relationship with Hargeisa, and Somaliland would be 100% very fine with that. They will get economic aid, they will get protection of the US, they will have more movement within the Western circles, whether it's financial circles or what have you. Basically, America would be its protector. So we would probably, that's more practical in my opinion than an outright recognition.
Right. Having said all of that, with that opportunity out there with multiple options that you just laid out, given the successive colonial regimes and how they have reportedly made some counterproductive democratic with a small d moves, and therefore making it hard to sell Somaliland's notable successes democratically. What needs to be done in that regard? Because there seems to be some sort of political implosion right now in Hargeisa, with which three political national parties will participate in the upcoming presidential election. Divisive items like that, what could they do to the prospects of what we just talked about?
Yeah, I think Somaliland, if they want to get to their objective, they have to really understand the politics of the West, in my opinion. I think until now, starting from the late Mohammed Haji Ibrahim Egal to Royale, politics was in the hands of civilians one way or another. I think Musa Bihi is the closest that comes from radical wing of the Somalilanders politics, whether that's the army or the former Somali National Movement, SNM. And those groups, organizations usually train their people to not accept a middle road, win or lose. And Mr. Bihi has been playing a very tough ball with regional groups, with Sol, with Senag, with Audal, and internally within Somaliland. I think he seems to have moved away from that consensus building that the Igal or even Rayale carried. And one of the ways that Somaliland sort of captured the attention of the world, particularly the West, was not because of its great economic success, because most people live off a meager resource. It is accommodative politics and the one consensus building, all the way from the Gurti to the last one of Rayale, who come from really nowhere and followed the footsteps of his former boss and won. And I think Musa Bihi needs to come back to that, open the channels of communication with different groups, and relax his attitude a little bit.
Right. Finally, I appreciate the time you've given us this afternoon in addressing some of these issues. But if you could lay out what the ramifications for Somalis in the Horn of Africa is, the reported strategic competition between the US and China, which happen to be the two main superpowers right now in the world.
Yes. So history is always a lesson teacher for us. The first round of Scramble for Africa, Somalis were the victims for that. As you know, the geographic expressionists, and I will not even say states, we have several geographic expressionists that are associated with Somalis, whether you call it Somalia, Somali Kenyan, Djibouti, Somali Ethiopian, Somaliland. We have been introduced to geographic expressions, and those geographic expressions reflect who colonized swaths of Somali. So we were the very victims, and that coincided with an international realignment of the world at the time, 1880s. Then the second realignment of the world took place in 1945, 40 to 45, during the Second World War, which also played a number on us. Not only did that the Second World War's outcome maintain our geographic expressions, but it also even re-sliced, re-divided that geographic expression. So the Haud and Reserve area, which today would have been easily part of Somaliland, from the Redawa all the way to parts of Gardenia, were right in our eyes being sliced and given to Ethiopia. Not to mention Northern Frontier District of Somalia was also given to Kenya as a way to let the British owners of plantations and haciendas in Kikuyu land to remain. So it was an exchange that the British did. So that's second. The third is now with traditional forces such as Russia, US, China, what have you, but also a new local warlord appearing in the scene, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Turkey, what have you. The focus is on us. And the focus is mainly now on Somalia, to divide Somalia, or to reunite and use them, to even slice, further. Ethiopia is another player on the new warlord is on the corner, in which Zeila is becoming a big hot potato for Ethiopia, and claiming even some Somali clans as being part of. And what Jirde was saying is not currently produced. It has been here for a while. Now you have even some Ethiopian scholars who are writing that parts of, as far as Mogadishu is part of Ethiopia, the old Menelik concept that said my boundaries are Benadir. So my fear is that the second round of international realignment could also impact us negatively if we don't get our acts together. And I don't see, to be honest with you, I don't see a Somali middle class, urban-based middle class that understands the nuance of world politics standing up to mitigate what's coming to us.
I appreciate it as dire as that picture is. I hope we take notice and pay attention to what you just laid out for the betterment of the Horn of African Somalis and beyond. I immensely thank you for joining us today, and perhaps we can continue our conversation in the near future. Thank you so much, and have a great evening.
The same to you, Abdelkader. I will hopefully rejoin you some other time. Thank you. Appreciate it.